Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hello.
Hello.
So let's recap real quick. So this whole everybody kind of square on photography versus cinematography. It's a big concept to kind of remember because they're both equally important, but there are those differences that we really have to cement in our heads because if you don't take those differences into your head, you're gonna have a problem when you start making films and videos. And so what are those differences? Well, the first one obviously is going to be the whole idea of motion, where we have to think about moving the camera, think about subjects moving, so instead of being a one-dimensional freeze frame of the action that's happening, and grant you, still images can have motion in them, right? And there's lots of cool things you can do, but we're not really thinking about dynamic motion. We're thinking about just capturing motion, freezing that instant, and those are powerful. But in cinematography, I have to consider motion. I have to consider where the actors, the talent, the subject, are they moving towards me, moving away? Are they walking to the left, to the right? Are they going up in an airplane or coming down? Is my camera static? Am I panning, tilting? Or am I zooming? Am I dollying in, trucking in? Am I moving? How am I moving the camera? Because in the end, it is about movement. If you are not moving the camera, you're losing a grand aspect about filmmaking and storytelling. So that's the first thing. We want to keep that in the back of our heads. And even if you're stuck on a tripod and you're like, well, I don't have any dollies or any of that stuff, and I don't want to take it handheld, I can still think about panning and tilting and that stuff. And even if it's a micro movement, that still will contribute this emotional context to what you're doing. So that's important to think about. And then the other thing to really think about is the whole idea of the interconnection of our shots. So again, in photography, we're talking about, I could have a portfolio, I could have a showcase or a gallery where I have a bunch of themes, a theme of images, and they all were related to each other. And that's true. But in the world of photography, those images are still self-contained stories. They can be self-contained stories. They can all tell a story together in a theme. When we are working in cinema or filmmaking, video, however you want to define it, each one of these shots that we shoot or a separate element that are part of a bigger storytelling process. I can't tell a whole story with just one shot. And I know we talked about it last class where, yeah, there's some movies. I told you about one movie. Anybody watch that movie I told you about, Victoria? All done with one take? If you haven't, write it down and do it, because you're going to be like, whoa, I didn't know you can actually do this for real. That's the exception. 90% of the world, photography, cinematography, filmmaking, each one of these shots has to work with each other to build a sequence that sequence is part of the film. So you have to think about this big thing, right? We're making a movie. It's this monster. It's a big wall. Movie making is like climbing Everest. This big, huge thing we got to get over. If I step back and think of it all at one pop, look at the matrix on its own, at the raw data, I'm going to short circuit my brain. So I need to break it down in all these components, and those components are broken down into more digestible, more doable things. That's the only way we can get it done. So whether that's a YouTube video, a music video, your short, your documentary, feature-length film, we all do it the same way. We can't process everything in the whole. The only time I can see the whole thing is at the end when I'm sitting in a theater watching it. When I'm creating it, I got to reduce it down to the core elements and deal with them on a step-by-step process so that I can get everything done and get it and not be overwhelmed. That makes sense, right? So part of the process that we're going to learn in this class is how do we reduce it down? How do we strip it down to those parts so that we can actually not be overwhelmed and go, this is an impossible task to do? Because it can be that way. And you think a movie's big, try doing a series of TV shows. Try doing, 8 episodes, 40-minute episodes, and trying to get that all done and organized and shot in a period of 6 months. You can't look at it all on the big picture. You have to break it down into tiny pieces. And so one of the things about that is going to be organization. You have to be organized. Everything has to be broken down and organized. And that's part of this whole first month of this class, is learning this whole idea of how do I take a big, huge thing and strip it down and reduce it down to little building blocks that I can actually go and create and do and put them all together, and I've got the thing there. Because if I can't do that, there's no way I'm going to get it done. And there's no way I'm going to wing it and go, I'll just figure it out on the fly and it's going to happen. Not going to happen. Specifically, when you're thinking about people financing you, they're not going to want to hear that. You hear, if a financer hears the word wing it, guess what's going to happen? They're going to wing out of there and take their money with them. And you're going to be like, what happened? So we're going to get to that. We're going to get through all that stuff. So those are like a couple of key things to think about. And then also remember, I also talked about the shutter, right? Remember we started talking about how the shutter is a creative tool in both cinema and in photography, but in cinema, I can't use the shutter to control exposure. If I do that, I'm gonna ruin the motion of the images. Because if it, again, think about this, if I'm just freezing motion in a still photography, I can freeze motion, I can create motion blur, and those are cool effects. But in motion, in the world of cinematography, I have to keep that constant motion that's normal. And everybody remember what that was? What shutter setting that was? Ooh, everybody's quiet. Guess they're gonna have to have a quiz on all this. The crickets are talking.
180 degrees.
Yay, there you go. And bonus question, if I translate that to fractions, what is it?
At 150?
150. Oh, it's a trick question. 150 at what? What frame rate?
Oh,
124.
24 frames.
Yes, 24 frames a second. So remember, the basic trick to getting normal motion is to, whatever my frame rate is, double it. So if I'm shooting at 24 frames a second, I'm going to want to have my shutter set at 1/48th, but guess what? DSLRs don't do 1/48, so you got to round up to 1/50th. If I'm shooting 30 frames a second, then I want to double it. I get 1/60th of a second. So that's the simple formula. And then why do we do in degrees instead of fractions? Well, it won't work in your DSLRs, but in cinema cameras, everything's done in degrees, and the camera does the math for you. I don't have to calculate every frame rate change I do, what fraction I have to do. I just tell the camera, hey, make sure it's at 180 degrees, and it doesn't matter if I'm shooting at 24 frames, 30 frames, 60 frames, 120 frames, it will automatically calculate that for me. So that's the cool thing about it. Unfortunately, normal DSLRs will not do that, so you have to do the math yourself. And again, I've got that cheat sheet. If you go onto Canvas, you could, last week, you could see that whole little presentation I did with the breakdown of the simple math. But all you need to know is double your frame rate gives you the fraction of what your shutter needs to be. That's important if you want it to look like cinema. If you don't care, then okay, well then go for it. And then, so I'm saying that, what else did I say about the shutter? If I go, what can I be creative with the shutter? Like I am in still? Yeah, right. Remember we talked about, I get no's. No, yes. So remember, it's all about aesthetics. So if I want it to be normal motion blur, right? Remember, I wave your hand like this in front of your eyes, that blur that you see there in your eyes is kind of equivalent to 180 degrees or 1/50th at 24 frames a second. So that's normal. That's what we see as normal. But what if I want to make it more blurry? What if I want it to be more psychedelic? Let's say my character is going through on drugs or something, and I want to see the world through that person's eyes, right? Want it to be more motion blurry and confusing. Well, I'm going to open the shutter up. I'm going to let the shutter be longer. So anything above 180 degrees is going to be more motion blurry, which means anything, a longer shutter time. So if it's normally 1/60th of a second, well, if I start making that shutter longer and longer, so 1/15th of a second, 1/10 of a second. I'm going to get more and more motion blur. The opposite's true too. If I want something to be more hyper realistic, if I want the motion to feel more gritty and in your face and more crisp and clear, then I'm going to make the shutter time faster, which means that we're talking about degree in shutter, then we're talking about anything underneath 180. So 90 degrees, 45 degrees. Translate that to fraction of a second. Now we're talking anything above 1/60th. So 1/80th, 1/90th, 1,000, 10,000. Pick as high as you can go. The higher you go, the more staccato that motion is going to be. Think Saving Private Ryan, right? So that's important to really think about, because if you don't want those effects, and if you shoot your whole movie like that, it's going to look weird. The audience is going to react to it and go, okay, why is this look like this? Is this a new aesthetic? Is this the style of the movie? Okay, great. But maybe that's going to give me a headache after a while. Anybody see the movie Hardcore Henry?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That POV movie where they basically put GoPros or something and they shot the whole thing from one perspective.
yeah.
It was a fun gimmick, right? But after a while, it got boring, to me at least. And also, because they used those cheap cameras, the shutter, everything was super hyper realistic, which worked for that gag. But if you were trying to do a drama or you're trying to do a romantic comedy with that, your audience it wouldn't jive with them. They wouldn't feel it. It wouldn't be emotionally connecting. So that, to me, is probably the biggest difference between, when technically between shooting stills and shooting motion, is that shutter. You got to keep that in the back of your head. So again, if you use the cheat sheets and and just keep an eye on it, making sure where you want your shutter based on the creative thing you want to do, then you're going to be successful and everything's going to work right. And so, again, when we said, because I can't use the shutter to help me control exposure, that means I have to rely on the ISO on the camera. That means I got to rely on the f-stop. But if I want to shoot outdoors in bright sunny days with an f2, that aperture all the way open, and I dial down my ISO on the camera, that's only got to go down to say 200. It's still too bright outside. It's going to overexpose. So my best friend in the world to shoot outdoors is going to be those neutral density filters that I talked about. So again, all that stuff is in the modules. It's in that first week of the whole breakdown on those things that you want to kind of refresh your brain on. I'm not saying officially, but there's a good chance might give you guys a quiz in a week once we get through this next round of stuff, just to see where you're at. Everybody should have taken the quiz already on the job, descriptions, right? Everybody good on that? Everybody's passed with flying colors, right?
Yeah.
That's the word I want to hear. Yeah. So think about those ideas. They're really important. Most students screw up with their images because they don't think about that. And I know we're not on campus, so you don't have access to our equipment. So if you don't have access to neutral density filters, you may be forced to use the shutter to control your exposure. And is that going to mean you're going to fail or get a bad grade? No, it just means that, we've got to work with the way we're at right now. But what's important is that you understand how you really control exposure, and that's the way to do it. So when you see these really cool movies or you see really cool YouTube videos where they have this super shallow depth of field and everything looks cinematic, think about these things that I talked about last class. That's what brings us into that realm. And so that's the first piece of the puzzle, is how to get the camera to kind of work in a way that feels like a real cinema camera. We're talking about DSLRs. Obviously, if you have access to a digital cinema camera, some of them have built-in neutral density. Some of them have all this stuff in there that kind of makes life easier. But for the rest of us who don't have access to that, we have to kind of work around it and get our still cameras into that cinema configuration to work better. So if understanding the technology of the cameras is round one to getting to making cinematic images and cinematic sequences, what do you think is step two? Anybody take a guess?
Editing?
No, we're not there yet. Let's stick more with cameras and shots and everything. So if I just do this, if I have is that going to look very cinematic if I'm kind of like this?
No.
Oh,
Why not? How do you know?
You don't angle.
The what? Say again.
An angle. You're not
Yeah,
like shooting from an angle or anything.
I'm not really putting any thought into it. I'm just shooting. You know, it's just the selfies when everybody's got the selfie stick and they're doing the duck face. They're like, hey, you know, there's nothing going on there. It's just,
Storyboarding?
what's that?
Storyboarding?
Well, we're going to get there, but you're all on the right track. Those are different stages, but the next stage is all about, let's talk about framing today. We're going to talk about framing. We're going to talk about basic composition. We're talk a little bit about design elements, but these are the building blocks of making cool shots. Cool shots are not about just, you know, holding the camera somewhere. They're not just about finding the perfect angle. It's about telling visual storytelling within the camera, regardless of what the subject you're shooting. And so great cinematographers, great filmmakers, directors, camera people, all get this visual storytelling thing in their head. And it doesn't matter what they shoot. So for me, it doesn't matter what I'm shooting. I'm going to be able to accurately, let me rephrase that, not accurately, but to the best of my ability, visually create a narrative in my frames that relates to what I'm shooting on, the subject that I'm shooting. And so there's a couple levels to do that. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to like, wow, after today's class, I'm going to be a master at doing this. No, it's just like everything we've talked about. It takes time and energy and practice to get there. But if you listen to me and follow some of these building blocks about frame composition, you're going to get on the right track and start seeing it better and understand how important this is. And this is, you know, and again, you know, when we think about the Oscars out there, right? Every year the Academy Awards happen. And yeah, some people may argue that that's just the industry patting themselves on the back. Hey, you did good. No, you did good. Well, you did good. Let's all vote for each other, all that stuff. But the reality of it is those awards are important because they really do show the skill levels that people reach. And if you listen to most people who get up there and accept their award and thank their mom and their producer and everything, a lot of them mention the struggle and what it takes to get there. And that's the truth. So in order to be a great DP and get an Oscar for cinematography, you really got to understand storytelling from a camera's perspective, and storytelling from a director's perspective, and from the actor's perspective, and from the editing. Everything all wired together, but we need to start somewhere. So today we're going to start with frames and talk about basic composition and stuff. And so some of this, for some of you who may have been in photography class, it might be a little repetition here, but for some of you, it's not going to be. And this is the key here. This is what's going to separate the amateurs from the pros when we look at people's work, how your composition is, what's your framing like? Does it look like it's all over the place? Does it actually have direction? Is it contributing to the narrative of whatever this is? And remember, when I talk about narrative, it's not necessarily about the script and something that's going to be, you know, on the theater as a fictional piece. Documentaries have narrative in them. Reality TV has narrative in them. Commercials have narrative. Everything has a form of narration where there's some storytelling happening there. And if you're really good at being a director or a DP or a filmmaker or whatever, pick your poison, you'll know how to tell those stories with just visuals. That makes sense to everybody? Okay, so I'm going to start at the basics here. I'm going to share my screen. So the first thing I want to talk about is the 6 priorities that determine where the eye looks. And this is really important to think about. And again, we're talking about a basic view of this, and not, it can go pretty deep. So what I want to start out is there's a hierarchy. And this guy, these two people, this guy, Norman Hawley, and this Larry Jordan has actually made this video, which is awesome. He talks about this whole concept. So where does the eye go first? When you're looking at an image, whether it's still, and you know, and a lot of this concept applies to still equally, these apply to graphics. This is generally psychology of how our brain works. What are we going to go towards? So there's a hierarchy here. So the first thing our eye's going to go to is something moving, motion. The second thing it's going to go to is what's in focus. The third thing it's going to go to is something different in the frame. Brighter objects, then followed by bigger, and then finally in the front. You may think always in the front is going to be where your eye is going to go to, and that's not correct. I'm going to play a little bit of this, and I'll probably skip through it. It's about 7 or 8 minutes long. Lots of good information in here. We're just going to whiz through it because we've got some other stuff to talk to about, but definitely want to go back and watch this. So let me just play it for a minute.
This is an excerpt of a recent Power Up webinar illustrating visual literacy.
And don't let Larry's
My
voice
name
put you to
is
sleep.
Larry Jordan. In this short video tutorial, I'll explain the
We're going to get past that.
priorities of where the eye looks first, and it's impossible. The first place the eye looks is movement. Second place we look is something that's in focus. We look for that. Whatever is first or highest on the list. Where did your eye go? Well, clearly it went to that horse moving, and our eye goes first. Let me illustrate. Where did your eye go? Well, clearly it went to that horse moving in the front. Now this is a still image, but there's no question that horse is moving between the dust and the way their feet are placed and the mane is waving in the wind. But why is movement so important? For tens of thousands of years, we've been hunter-gatherers. If something in our peripheral vision starts to move, the very first thing we do is we look at it. And we say, can I eat it? Or is it going to eat me? It's a fight or flight response. Movement catches our eye, and we must investigate it to figure out whether it's something we need to worry about. This is hardwired into our brains. Even a small movement catches our attention.
I'm going to pause it there for a second. So, seeing a theme here? Yeah. Moving the camera, moving subjects, movement. Movement is what captures our eye. So that's the first priority in your image. So if you have a shot, a super wide shot, let's say, and it's a lock off, the camera's not even moving. And in the distance, there's a small car driving across the horizon, and it's maybe 0.5% of the size of the frame. That's where our eye's going to go. Even if the frame is framed up beautifully and it's a sunset and a sky, that piece of movement is where we're going to go. And this whole point here is that photography, cinematography, this whole visual medium is all based on psychology in our head, what we react to. So when we start thinking about framing and composing stuff in our camera, we want to think about how this is affecting. If you understand the psychology about how we perceive images, then suddenly you've got this great grab on how to make compelling images, because it's all about grabbing us. There's an amazing book out there. I'm going to put it in the chat. I don't know if it's out of print now, but it's it's a textbook called Applied Media Aesthetics. So this book changed my life as a camera person, as a DP. I was in college. I actually had a class on it, and I took it. I had no idea what it was all about. And this book basically broke down how everything works in our brain when it comes to the image, why the edges of the frame are magnetic, why we need a certain amount of headroom, nose room. Why when we touch something happens? Why red means one thing, blue means another thing to us. And so as the industry, Hollywood, the filmmaking industry evolved throughout the years, and this technology, this thing called filmmaking became a science, what it really boils down to is how do we apply this stuff to someone to psychologically manipulate them? That's what this is all about. And the same thing applies to still imagery, graphics, whatever it is, web page design. It's all about building something that affects us psychologically. So someone here does psychologically apply to audio as well? Yeah, absolutely. The name of the game here is we're manipulating our audience. Everybody who goes into the movies, everybody who sits in front of their TV, anybody who sits in front of their computer to look at stuff, wants to be manipulated. And when I say the word manipulation, it's not a bad thing. It's not negative. It's positive. Do you go to a movie to laugh and cry laugh at a comedy, cry at a drama, be excited by an action movie, right? Why do we want that? Anybody take a guess? Takes us away, right? How many people have had a rough day and they're like, man, I just want to sit and laugh, watch a comedy and feel better, right? Or how many people like going to scary movies? Hey, look, somebody likes horror, right? Why do you want to be scared?
It's a safe way to be scared.
Right, but scared is an emotion, right? It's a strong emotion. So we all like that. Ah, whoa, that got me. That got you, it got me too, right? So when you go to a movie, you're willingly going to be manipulated. So most people are expecting a certain outcome. So if you say you have a scary movie, what happens when you go to see a scary movie and it sucks?
I'm so disappointed.
Right, you're disappointed. You're like, man, how about those movies that have that super ending? You're like, whoa, that was such a twist I didn't expect. And you talk about it for 2 days. It's all about manipulation. So it's a willingly, you're willingly going to be manipulated. You're expecting to be manipulated. You know, the big joke with Disney movies is that every time we watch a Disney movie at my house, my wife will start crying at one point, guaranteed. There's a moment where they've got the music dialed in perfectly. The tearjerker moment's going to happen, and my kid looks at him going, "Why are you crying? You cried this the last time we saw this." And she's like, "I can't stop," because it's that moment. It's not because she's just being manipulated, because that's what Disney's doing. They specifically want that moment. They know people want that release of emotion. And so they're all experts there. The mouse is a genius at manipulating you to cry, to laugh, to do whatever, whether it's their movies, their TV shows, their theme parks, whatever, it's all about that world of manipulating your audience. So when we start out as filmmakers, we really want to think about that. We want to think about, my job here is to manipulate someone, to influence them, to cause an emotional reaction. And to do that properly, I have to do it at all levels. The script has to be right. The actors have to deliver the lines properly. The sound has to be right. The music has to be the right music cue. And the cinematography has to have it right way. So these 6 priorities is just the start here. So just thinking about how motion affects somebody in in the image, how where we direct the eye is a form of manipulation. And that's how far down the rabbit hole it goes. That's the level we're really thinking about, all the way down to the frames, down to the music, down to whatever. It's all being calculated. How is this going to affect the audience? Whenever I'm shooting, whenever I'm framing a shot, that's what I'm thinking about. The priority I'm thinking about is the audience. What are they getting out of this? What am I showing them? What am I hiding? Am I causing confusion? Am I doing it on purpose? If I'm not doing it on purpose, then I'm doing something wrong. Am I revealing just the piece of information they need to get them moving to the next sequence? Is this shot, this angle, this lighting contributing to the emotional impact of whatever the subject matter is happening there? That's the level that it really happens at a professional level. And that's the level you need to think about when you're trying to even start at this level of just figuring out shots and framing and blocking. Does that make sense? All right, so let me just finish and get into this real quick. We're going to kind of whip through this guy real quick. So he talked about block.
That's why video is so powerful. It is nothing but movement, moving actors, moving cameras, moving shots. Movement is the #1 priority to catch the eye of the viewer. Why did you look at the woman first? She's not the biggest thing in a frame. She may not even be the brightest, but she's the only thing in the image that is in focus. Our eye instantly grabbed that which is in focus as the central core portion of that image. Wasn't even a question. Once we made sure that we saw her, then we'll wander around and see who she's smiling at, the environment, and what they're doing. But first, we see her. If nothing is moving, our eye goes to that which is in focus first.
Okay, so that's an interesting comment to think about. Motion is most important. So it doesn't even mean the motion has to be in focus. If there's someone in focus and then there's motion, something in the foreground that's out of focus, our eyes automatically going to go there first. That's the priority. From there, then it may go back to what's in focus. So when you start thinking about these things, and so do you have to memorize all this stuff and get it all in your head when to even go out and shoot? No. But knowing this, that there's a priority level of everything, allows you to have a little bit of freedom of how you compose shots, how things, one of the big, not mistakes, but one of the telltale signs of amateurs is everything's in focus, because they're like, oh, I gotta have it in focus for everybody to see. That's gotta be important. And we realize, go watch movies. A lot of times there's gonna be someone standing there in focus, then something comes up behind them. It's out of focus moving. As soon as that thing comes up, you're just like, whoa, what is that behind her, right? Pulls your eye away. We don't have to have everything in focus. Things can be out of focus. And it doesn't mean your whole shot is, if your shot's completely blurry and out of focus, it's okay. No, that there needs to be something somewhere. But my point here is that we think about focus, normally we think that's the priority, and it's not. It can be movement, and then it goes to focus. And you can play this game where things are moving. Your focus can move. You can imagine I've got someone looking this way, right? And I'm camera, right? Let's do it this way. Let's say your camera, I've got someone, I'm looking at the camera like this. And then over my shoulder, something comes up and it's out of focus, right? So you may see that movement at first and go, what is that? We may rack focus the camera from me to that, changes this from just movement to focus. And then I may turn and be like, it's the monster coming to kill me, right? So here I've used these two devices combined together.
Why did you look at the color squares first? Because they're different. Everything else here is a curve or a pastel color, not the squares. Nothing else is black but the squares. Nothing else has sharp corners, really, but the squares. If everything is in focus, our eye goes to that which is different. Why did your eye go to the girl in the white t-shirt? Because she's brighter. Both women are in focus. They're both the same size. But the bright white of her t-shirt draws your eye. Then maybe it looks at the corner left side where the light streams in behind the curtains, or checks out the other woman, or looks at the background, but your eye goes first to the woman on the left.
Okay, so wardrobe. Super important, right? Everybody's starting to see a recurring theme here. All the components that go into everything in filmmaking, everything has meaning, everything has significance. There's nothing left to be contemplated or not considered. So if I want her to be the main actress and I want her to be the thing noticed, I'm going to make sure she's wearing something brighter. I'm going to find some way to make her the most important thing. So all this stuff, again, builds up on top of each other.
Why did you look at the woman first and not the meeting going on behind her? Well, you could argue that she's in focus, and that's true. You could argue that she's different, and that also is true. But I would suggest that the reason we looked at her first is because she's bigger. She's bigger than the other people. She's bigger than whatever's on the wall. Our eye goes to that which is bigger. If everything is still, if everything is in focus, if nothing is particularly different, if everything is the same size, our eye goes to that which is in front. All the men are looking in the same direction. They're all dressed roughly the same way. They're all wearing turbans and beards. All things being equal, our eye goes to that which is in front. Now we can combine these as we do here. There's multiple things going on. First, she's wearing brighter clothing than the people in the background. She's in focus. She's in front. She's in the center. The photographer made sure, guaranteed, that you're going to look at the lead singer here before you look at any of the backup group. Now, I'm not saying your eye can't look elsewhere, but the very first place you go is the woman bright, in focus, front and center. We see her first. Just as we can do this with photographs, we can also do it with graphics. Here you're...
Okay, I'm going to kind of pause it here. So the point here being is that I want to direct the eye, priority. That's the most important thing. We're talking now just about cinematography, composition wise. Where am I putting the eye? Where do I want my audience to look? And so I can use these 6 things here, but I also want to make sure that they're not competing with each other. So if movement's in the frame, well, that's where my eye's going to go first. So I better have movement, and that's the thing I want them to go to. If I have movement in the frame and that's not where I want their eye to go to, then that may distract and throw our audience off. But these are, guidelines, I'd say. I mean, you can call them rules, however you want to define them, but they're more about what our brain does, right? First, and we're talking about where it goes. And so you can combine these together. You can have movement and lighting, brightness or darker, in front, all different things combined together to help you figure out what you want to do about where you want to direct someone's eye. But in the end, what's important here is to understand these concepts and understand that there is a hierarchy. So you don't want to get in a position where the eye is going someplace else, not where you want it to intend, even though you're like, well, I'm focused on this person here, but no, it's because that person you focused on is so tiny in the frame. There's stuff in the foreground and there's movement that no one's going to see what's going on here because their eyes going to get distracted here. So part of this is just trying to figure that out. And the best way I suggest would be is to go out and experiment, just start playing around, shooting stuff and seeing what works, where people's eyes get caught. I watch it all the time. And I watch people, and I say, "Do you see that thing?" And they're like, "No, I didn't see it." And it's maybe because the movement was distracting from the focus, or something was brighter or in the front or bigger than the thing you really wanted them to focus on. So you want to pay attention to that. And this kind of goes down to my idea of simplicity. It's okay to have big, elaborate shots, but if you pile in too much stuff into the shot where you can't really see what is the important part of what the story maker is trying to get across, then you've lost your audience a little bit. And anybody see any big action movies where the fight scenes happen and you just have no idea what's going on? Because there's so much action, there's so much movement, there's so many things, or it's so much in focus that you lose track of it. And so maybe in some of those filmmakers' eyes, that's what they wanted. They want you to get lost in the battle, right? And so you just have no place to look. And maybe that's a good, way to go for a couple shots. But when it happens constantly, and a lot of times, like big action movies, they do that so much that you just get lost and you're trying to play catch up. And in the end, that gives us a dissatisfied experience as a filmmaker. I'm sorry, as an audience. And so as a filmmaker, we want to just be aware of that. I'm here for the audience. That's the end thing you want to think about. It's not, I may love doing this and this may be great and cool, and I'm making it for myself, but I'm not making it for myself. In the end, I'm making it for someone else to watch. So I got to kind of keep them in the back of my head, and I got to kind of respect them, that I don't want to confuse them. I want, if I'm, we're starting where the eye looks, I want to be able to, them to know where they want to go. Okay, so everybody's clear. You can go back and rewatch this video again. And the thing I would say is, when you start watching movies or TV shows the next couple of days, start looking at this stuff. Just keep it, maybe write on a piece of paper and put it next to your computer and go, oh, in this shot, what's going on here? Is it movement? Is it focus? Is it different? Where's my eye going? And that's like stage one of trying to see this idea of composition and forcing the audience where we want to go. And this is the big difference to me between first is the big difference between actually composing images and creating shots versus capturing something, right? We're just shooting our, the home movies at Disneyland. We're just, whatever happens. We're just letting the camera, whatever happens in the frame is just going to happen. When we're creating stuff for consumption, for audience consumption, we don't do that. Even if we pretend that that's happening, that's not the goal. We're constantly manipulating the frame, what's in the frame, to direct the eye or to emotionally or psychologically affect our audience. So basic composition and design elements. Let's jump into there. Okay, so some of this is going to go hand in hand with still photography. Some of it will not. But we want to think about these ideas of design elements. And what are design elements? Whether they're fundamental concepts or fundamental ways of describing things in shots, whether they're still or motion, that that we all can kind of communicate about. It's almost like a jargon, right? Remember we talked about jargon? I think we talked about it last week. It's short-term communication between things. So there's a lot of jargon in composition, in design elements, in framing, in cameras in general, and in filmmaking in general is just chock full of it, just like every other industry. So let's take a look at some of the ones in here. So the first one obviously is rule of third. Anybody here not heard of rule of thirds? Okay.
I haven't.
So basically rule of thirds, an image should be imagined as divided into 9 equal parts by 2 equally spaced horizon lines and 2 equally spaced vertical lines. Well, that sounds pretty technical. Important compositional elements should be placed along these lines or in their intersections. Aligning a subject within these points creates more tension, energy, and interest in the composition than simply centering the subject. So here's our 16, let's say this is our 16 by 9 frame, right? If I put something dead center, and there are situations where I want to do that, and 9 times out of 10, when I center something up, it has to do with symmetry. Everything's symmetrical, everything's perfectly balanced in symmetry, and that's going to work. But for regular subjects, I don't want to put it there. And so the main reason why is it's boring. Okay. So again, remember, we're here to manipulate our audience. The magic word is engagement. I want to engage my audience. Now, whether or not they can look at a shot and go, oh yeah, I can see this is not very energetic because the subject's been placed dead center in the framing and there's no symmetry happening here. Nobody's going to break it down like that except people in college, right? But I guarantee you that the audience may not be able to technically describe why something doesn't work right or feel right, but they can certainly tell you it doesn't feel right. And so if I create a bunch of images that are dead centered, not too exciting, your audience is going to see it. Now, there are exceptions to the rules, and there are situations when you can break the rules. And there's a great example is the Fury Road, the last Mad Max movie. Everybody see that one? Came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the funny, I should find it and show it to you guys. There's a funny interview with the DP who shot the movie, and basically Mike Miller, who directed them all, he told his camera people that put them dead center, put everything cross dead center in the shot. I don't want thirds. I don't want it like that. I want everything important to be dead centered. And they're like, whoa, that's totally against what we normally do. And the reason he did that is because this movie was going to be edited at such a high pace that, and you go back and look at it, most shots, I'm not going to say that there's every shot, but a majority of the shots are going to be under 3 seconds long. So his philosophy was that if I put the important stuff in dead center in the frame, then the audience is just going to have barely enough time to see that and register it and then move on. And so when I looked at the movie afterward, I was like, yeah, I can see a lot of the stuff was in the center. And did it make it ruin it? Did it make it boring or no tension? No, because it was so action-packed and full and fastly cut and edited that where it may have been not quite as impactful visually on the framing, the editing and the movement and everything else made up for it. So there are certainly situations where you can break these rules. But for the majority of us, I'm going to say it's a good place to start, because once you follow these rules, it's going to help you compose your shots better. And once you get comfortable with like rules of third, for example, you can know when to break them and it'll still work. But if you don't pay attention to it, then your shots are going to lack. So everything dead center. If I have talking heads, just an interview like me right now, I'm just in the center. My framing's just like this the whole time. It could be a little bit boring. But if I'm off to the side a little bit, there's an imbalance happening in the frame. And that imbalance kind of creates this little bit of tension, a little bit of energy into it. So we want to think about that in terms. So whenever I'm usually framing stuff up, I'm just naturally gravitating to rules of third. I don't even think about it. I don't have it set up on my camera or anything. It just happens naturally because that's done it so many times. I get accustomed to it. So when you're first starting out, you just want to think about this. Okay, do I want to put it in thirds? Will thirds work for now? Centering, yeah, I will do stuff centering for sure. But I usually have an exception to the rule. It means symmetry. It means really beautiful stuff in the center.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you some examples. So here we go. Here's the thirds. If something's interesting, a talking head, something, I'm going to put it on the cross lines, where these cross. I could put one here, I could put it here, I could put it here, I could put it here. Points of interest on intersections. Let's take a look at this. Everybody see the thirds here? He's on a third. Her legs are on a third right there. Notice that he's right in the center there. I back it up 1 second, take a look again. If you look at it right now, it feels pretty balanced, right?
Yeah.
But here you can see it. You can see where those lines are. Here's another one. There you go. Cow, oxen, head's right here. She's bent over with the crutch right down here. Balanced out. They're balancing each other out, but they're on the third, so it still kind of creates a little bit of energy here. So if I put interesting elements on these crosshairs, that's not the only way I could use these. I can also position important elements along the lines too. So instead of just having it right here, 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 or here, I could put something on this line. I could put something on this line. Get it on this line or this line if I wanted to. Take a look at this. You're like, oh, wait, he looks centered, right? Wait, this is not right. But look, the horizons. You see that? The horizon here is on a third, and then the bottom here is on a third, and he's heads in the center where there's symmetry here. So this all works perfectly to put this subject in the middle. Still applies to the rules of third. Look at it again. Check out this fancy shot. I wish I was there right now. Look how nice that is. Here we go. Horizontal thirds. One right there, one right there. So I'm breaking the background up into horizontal thirds and getting the balance out. Notice that this horizon's not in the middle right here, when this one's not in the middle here. That would throw it completely off. But by putting them in the thirds, everything balances out. The other thing too is we can use natural lines to lead the eye into the picture. So check this out. So we've got these people standing on the railroad tracks with umbrellas. He's standing here. Look at the leading lines. Everybody see them? Everything brings our eye to him, makes him important, the important subject right here. We positioned him over here, it wouldn't feel right. We put him back here with them, it wouldn't feel right. Put him right here, the vectors, the lines are drawing our eye to him. So it's another way of directing the eye. Now, granted, these are all still images, but this still applies to motion. Same thing here. Look at these lines receding back to the Taj Mahal. They're coming up this way. I like this one a lot. Look how nice the lighting is on this shot. Look at the contrast. See the lines drawing us over. So also diagonal lines can also create great movement too. See these lines kind of bringing us, it's just creating this little bit of motion, and our subject is going to run through here and cut through there. So the way this was composed, the framing was set up to create these little vectors, these lines kind of showing our audience where this person's going to go. So imagine the beginning of the shot, this person's not here, and we say this for an instant, and then boom, we see our character run through there. It's kind of creating the path that we're going to see. I like this one too. Look at the lines there. So them going up this way, even though it's a snowy hill, we could see it adds energy, because them marching up the hill is a more powerful shot than, say, them just walking along this fence here. So if you were a filmmaker and you're like, okay, I want to portray the army unit as powerful, I would have them march up the hill. In fact, I wouldn't do the opposite and have them march down, because I would feel less powerful. By going uphill, it's forcing us to perceive them in a more powerful aspect. Another great tool that you guys should take advantage of is using natural frames to create frames within a frame. So check out this shot here. We've got the women, these people sitting in the train car. There's the frames within a frame. Each one of these, they're all framed in their own little window. Much more interesting and visually interesting than this standing outside or us being inside with them. Nice one here too. Look at this one. There's the frame, right? The car window becomes a frame. So you could do this shot from the same point of view and make it tighter, and we don't see the door frame or the window frame. And I'm going to argue that that's going to make it less interesting. This is much more interesting for us because it kind of compartmentalizes what's going on here. Also like that the window is up and it's a little bit blurry. So you can see that she's asking for help with her child and the window's up. What does that say? It's like the person inside the car isn't going to help. It's just, there's a separation between the two. So this frame within a frame can allow that to emphasize that emotional context of what's going on. Oh, look at this one. This one's nice too. Frame within a frame, right? Put them all here. They're not standing out here. They're not over here. Put them within this frame here. It makes it more powerful. Also, really nice contrast. Look at the side light coming in, the shadows here, creating all this no texture in here. And then we've got this broken pattern from the window or the opening here. Anything that you can add, the goal here is we're just trying to create images that are more compelling and more exciting and interesting for our audience. Doesn't mean every image, every frame in your shot needs to, in your film needs to be perfect and compelling. But if you have enough of them that are compelling, then it's going to make it work better. It's going to make your audience more engaged. Another big one, this is probably the biggest one in my opinion, is finding contrast between subject and background. So when we shoot with front lighting that's flat and boring, everything's equally lit, there's no contrast between anything, and it becomes less interesting, less engaging for your audience. So take a look at this shot. What's the subject here? Who's the subject?
The ballerina who's behind stage.
Why say the subject? Ooh, tough, right? Because of the contrast. Look at this. I kind of inverted the contrast here. You can see how she's just defined by this. Let me back it up one more time. This is also here, look, this is a frame within a frame, right? We've separated them from her. She's separated from them. So she's isolated. So she's outside of the group. So that means she must have some importance to her. Now I've wrapped her in blackness. So she really stands out. And what I really like about it is look at the lighting. Do we have to completely light her and still get this to be able to identify her? No. Look how nice it is. In fact, look at her. She blends into the background. Just this front lighting coming from here is hitting her up. And we're seeing this, and it's a much more powerful image. Imagine if this was lit. Imagine if there was a light in here and this was equally lit as there. It wouldn't be as impactful. It wouldn't be as compelling to us as an audience. So it's like she's in the darkness. She's in the sidelines looking out there, looking like she wants to be there, but not being allowed to participate, or whatever the narrative is in here. But the cinematography is contributing to that isolation. And by surrounding her with contrast, with blackness, it helps us separate her from here, where the rest of the ballerinas are. So the opposite can happen too. Look at these kids playing. So the dust cloud that they're kicking up here is brighter, and they're actually darker. But the same thing applies here. So take a look. If I invert it, they're still there. Their subject, the foreground is separated from the background. So I don't necessarily have to make it the subject the brightest things in the frame. I can invert it. I can have the environment brighter and my subject's darker, almost silhouette, and it still allows us to focus on them. The other thing too is patterns. Patterns can be aesthetically pleasing to us. So take a look at this. So why are patterns? Anybody know why patterns are interesting to us? Anybody ever lie down in their backyard and look up in the sky, and on an unusual LA day, you can actually see big puffy clouds? Anybody ever stared at puffy clouds? What happens when you look at clouds?
You look for a pattern or like a shape.
Don't you see things? Don't you start seeing shapes, faces, animals, something in the clouds?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It just happens naturally. Same thing, astronomy, right? All the constellations up in the sky. Are those really, Zeus and all these other, heroes from the past? Or are they something that we put there in our brain? So our brain is this machine, really, we're really super wired to identify patterns. Just like, have you ever been in a crowded party or at a bar or someplace with a ton of people, and someone comes in way in the back of the room and you look up and it takes you a millisecond to identify them, right? You know who they are, because our brain is a super pattern processing machine. We can identify patterns like crazy. People love jigsaw puzzles, word, games, all this stuff, because it's about patterns. It's how our brain works. We've been designed or evolved, or however you want to define it, to be identifying the patterns. So when we see things like this image here with all these patterns in there, it's compelling to us. We want to look for meaning and detail in there, even if there's nothing in there. It's just like looking up at the sky and clouds. So sometimes it's really cool to see. And so here, obviously, we got two people standing on a rooftop here. They're really what the story's about. But by having this whole town full of buildings here, the pattern makes it more compelling for us as an audience. Same thing's happening here. All this wrestling fighting match that's happening. We have all these people dressed the same. They technically become more of a bigger pattern. They're in focus, so we're more focused on them. And then obviously, if we're looking at the motion, they would be moving too. So the moving would be the priority, and then followed by the focus. But patterns are really cool to use. And when you watch movies, you'll see a lot of times there'll be some shots will have patterns in them. But what's a cool thing too is when you break the pattern up. So look at this. Everybody's dressed up in red with the red dye. This guy's in green. So our eye is going to go to where the pattern's broken up. Same thing here. Look at all the little carriages here, baby carriages. Then the two nuns here break the pattern up. So they suddenly become, this is even more powerful than the other shots of just patterns. Here, we get something separated from the pattern that becomes more priority on those subjects. So the nurses, for example, here. So patterns can be a cool visual way to engage your audience, but then you can break the pattern and make that the subject of whatever you're shooting. Okay, and then so symmetry. So I was talking about the rules of third, right? So rules of third are great for day-to-day use and great place to start, but symmetry can be super powerful also. And so when you have something that has symmetry in it, that's when you want to think about centering up your subject, because maybe that might be the way it goes. So take a look at this shot. So look at how they did the symmetry here. It's the kids riding in the front of the bicycle, almost directly split in half right here. So everything's balanced out. That makes this shot work. If we panned over to the left or the right and put them in the thirds, it wouldn't feel right because we'd be cutting off part of the handles on the bicycle. And this is all begging for symmetry. So part of how to identify when a shot needs to be centered with symmetry or not, well, that's up to you. But you should be able to know it when you see it and feel it. And well, how do I get to that point? Well, that equals practice. Just seeing and observing and experimenting until you find it and it becomes a natural, almost like a reflex of you. Another example here, look, they split the horizon in the center, and here it works exceptionally well because look at the reflection down here. It creates this interesting little composition, this little symmetry here. The reflections of the mountains down here. So it's like you have one half of the frame reality and the other half of the frame this blurry, surreal interpretation, almost like a painting going on. So here, definitely begs for it to be centered. Okay, so next thing, what else do we want to think about? Get close to your subjects. So a lot of times people do this. They're going to shoot somebody and they're going to shoot them from here, right? They're just going to frame something up and that's it. It's like surveillance, cameras. It's kind of boring, right? Do you feel intimate and personal with me?
It's more removed.
Right. So this is definitely more intimate. This might be a little creepy, right? So you want to get closer because a lot of times people want to see the detail. Your audience wants to see the information, and especially if it's something interesting or unique. Like think I don't know, horror movies or sci-fi or something where there's, you know, a character dressed up as an alien or a monster, you know, they wait to the end of the movie to reveal the monster, and then they're going to give you like that shot close up so you can really sink it all in. In the beginning, you may see the monster from a distance far away and removed, and you don't really get to get a good glimpse of it. But at some point, you want to get close to your subjects. So getting close just gets us more detail into them. Like, look at this guy. Look at all the detail in him, his paint, his hair, the texture, the color of his hair, his jewelry he's wearing. All that is compelling and more interesting when it's close up than it is from far away, from a medium shot or, you know, head to toe shot. Same thing with this guy. It's just got an interesting face. So we want to get as close as possible. Sometimes you may want to get extreme close and go really into it. So the moral of the story here with subject placement and distance is you try to get close in at least at some point. You don't necessarily have to be totally up close all the time, but at some point you want to get in there and get that intimacy, that more personal, even if that intimacy with your subject is uncomfortable, like getting close to the murderer, getting close to the alien or the monster. May not be the great thing, but it's still intimacy that works when it affects your subject. I mean, sorry, when it affects your audience. And then the other one too is going to be perspective, camera's point of view. This is probably the most important one. So here's a question. Normally, when you shoot low at somebody, it's going to give them more power because it's kind of like they're looking down on you. Like, anybody here ever go to court? Anybody ever watch court TV or anything like that?
Yeah,
Where's the judge sitting?
in the front, in the middle,
Is he at your height, below you, or above you?
above you,
Why do they do that?
to intimidate you.
Yeah, well, how does that intimidate you? Why does someone looking down at you intimidate you?
Because it's like they're bigger than you.
Right, bigger than you. They're a place of authority. You watch any type of president or dictator or king or queen, when they're addressing their audiences or their people, they put them up on a pedestal, a podium, right? They raise them up a bit, so everybody's looking up. It's all about an authority thing going on there. So same idea applies to cameras. If I drop the camera below someone's eye line, that makes the audience submissive to your subject. So if I want to have that hero shot where the guy's like, I'm the hero, right? He's Superman or whatever, I'm going to lower the camera and look up at them. So it makes them look bigger and more powerful. Likewise, if I want to make my audience more powerful, I want my subject or my characters to feel weak and helpless, I'm going to put the camera above them and look down on them. So now we're from the authoritative point of view, looking down on my subject. So it's a pretty powerful technique that if you start watching movies, you will see it constantly used. That's one of the things I'm always doing. So whenever, if I shoot somebody, we're deciding, are we neutral, which means eye level? Is the audience going to be submissive, or is it going to be authoritative to what's happening here? And so I'll literally measure, like if I got somebody over there and they're standing there and I got to set the camera over here, I may literally go up to them, find out where their eye level is, and put my hand next to me to get an idea where their eyes are, and then go back and decide, am I putting the camera above that line or below that line, depending on what the director and what we decide. So that's constantly thought about all the time. You go watch any action movie with a main character who's like a hero, like think of any Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, Rambo movies, pick whatever recent ones that are out there nowadays. They're most 9 times out of 10, they're never going to put the camera above the main actor or actress. It's the main character, unless they want them in a position of weakness. Always going to be low or maybe equal, but usually low. And take a look, you'll see it. So here's the trick question here. Is this guy standing here in a authoritative position, or he's in a weaker subjective position?
It looks kind of powerful. Like he's, I don't know, it looks positive.
It's certainly positive, but does he look like the most powerful thing in the shot?
No, because there's these giant buildings and the sun.
Right, right. So sometimes subjective, just because we are lower than him doesn't make him the most powerful thing, because he's, first of all, he's got his back turned to us and he's looking at these buildings. Look at this building, how much bigger it is than him. Look at the sun, the way it's lit and everything. So it makes these buildings the most powerful, biggest thing there. And then he's second in line, and then we're third in line. It's the camera point of view. So here, he's actually in a submissive position in relationship to the buildings. So when you do this type of stuff, you want to make sure whatever it is, the biggest things are like this, like the buildings, they're going to be the dominant subjects are going to be in the form of the authority figures, and everything else is going to cascade down. So this was always a little tricky shot here. All right. Let's stop sharing for a minute. So this is, again, you can look at this stuff in Canvas again and kind of go through it again. These are just kind of little basic guidelines. There's a lot more into design elements and composition. You know, we don't have enough, unfortunately, have enough time to cover them in this class because we've got so much stuff to go through. One of the things I would strongly recommend is that you want to get better at composition, maybe take one of the Photo 47 classes that we spent a lot more time in design elements and in the components that go into it. Here, we can only do a little quick taste of it because we've got much more bigger fish to fry in the next 16, 15, 14, something amount of weeks. So one of the most important things when it comes to framing and composition is to understanding the jargon, the shortcuts of describing things. So if I've got a director coming to me and saying, I need you to frame up this shot for me of this character. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want? Well, you know, I want it to be, you know, tight, but not so tight. I want to see a certain amount of his top of his head to a certain part in that person's chest and everything. And you could describe it that way. And I'm gonna be like, all right, I think I got it right. But then I may shoot it and like, no, it's too tight. No, it's too wide now. And the problem here is not that is communication. So instead of us trying to guesstimate stuff, there's certain framing sizes that we all have agreed upon to say these are what industry standard framing sizes are. And so one of the first things, you know, as a camera person, you need to learn these and know what they mean. So when someone calls out, give me a cowboy, you know what a cowboy is. Or they say, give me an MCU, you know what an MCU is. Give me an ECU. These are all shortcut to describing what shots are. And when you're on a set, that's how people are going to communicate. They're not going to say, well, give me that close up, you know, from the top of his head down to, you know, just above his chin. And, you know, no, they're saying, give me an ECU, please. And you need to know it. So we're going to run through some of those right now. So let's get into that framing and composition here. So shot size overview. So how you choose to shoot your frame, your subject will have a specific impact on your audience. So again, this is all about psychology. So the size of the frame is obviously going to have an effect on your audience. And so we want to exploit that when we're as filmmakers. How close or far away your subject is to the camera, your shot size will underscore how the audience should feel about it or them. Your subject will appear smallest in a long shot, or also known as a wide shot. They will be larger in medium shots and largest in a close-up. So you want to think about this, about familiarity when you consider your subject size in your camera shots. And I kind of bring it like this. It's like meeting someone for the first time. Anybody here ever meet somebody for the first time?
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, so when you meet them, what do? Like shake hands or, hey, how's it going, right? And talk about stuff. But when we first meet somebody, we don't know who they are. So we keep a little bit of a distance, right? You're going to kind of meet someone, you're going to kind of, there's like a comfortable area, right? We've all met those people, right? Anybody here meet a close talker? Someone was like, hey, how's it going? Oh, man, great to meet you. How's it going? And they just instantly jump into your grill and your face, and you're like, whoa, okay, I just got to know you, right? So I had a teacher that was like that. I had this college, I had this one teacher. He was teaching film, not theory, he was teaching film history and appreciation. And this guy, he was huge. He was this big guy with this big lion head. He was scary looking. And he was super nice, but this problem was he was an extreme close talker. So whenever you would come up to him and say hi, he'd be engaged with it. He'd want to know what you're doing, what's going on in your life. And he'd be like, dude, just get in there. I'd be like, oh yeah, tell me more. And you're just like, and the further back you went, he just kept approaching. And he just didn't understand. I don't know what was going on, but he just didn't get it. But I always think about that guy because he just didn't understand the differences about when you know, how personal space and whatnot. So when we think about cinematography and when we meet actors and stuff, it's kind of the same thing. So a lot of times people, when you first introduce a character, you may stay at like a little bit wider shot just to get to know who they are. And as we start to get to know the character and get more intimate, we start getting closer and closer and closer. Now, that's the general rule. And obviously, like I'm saying, a lot of these rules, once you use them enough, you can break them. There's definitely times when you can break them. So there's plenty of situations where you can be introduced to a character completely the opposite, where you're super hyper close. Think again, horror movies, think about thriller movies where we're not revealing the villain, the antagonist until the end. So you may only see extreme close-ups of a mouth or an eye. And that's, the exception of the rule. But if it's like our normal characters, our main protagonists, then we want to kind of start off maybe at a more relative distance that feels like when you meet somebody. So when you first meet someone, you might be like this far apart. And as you get to know each other, you might get closer and closer, and the intimacy gets tighter. So the same kind of concept happens in the film industry, the filmmaking world. So these camera shots can work the same way. So here we go. First one to know about is the extreme long shot, also known as an ELS. The extreme long shot makes your subject appear small against their location. You can use an extreme shot to make your subject feel distant or unfamiliar. It can also make your subject feel overwhelmed by its location. So the key today in talking about these camera shots is the balance between subject and environment, location. So when we start off here on the ELS, the extreme long shot, it's all about environment. It's all about how your subject, your characters, or whatever you're shooting, how they're going to interact in that world. So here we go, a clip from that Mad Max movie, right? Fury Road. Here's when they're all chasing him in the beginning. The whole caravan's chasing him. And here's this giant dust storm coming over to get them, right? Look at this shot. What do you get from it? What kind of emotional feeling or information do you get? Here's our subjects right here, right? They're all chasing Mad Max or whatever from here. Here's the whole group trying to kill him or capture him. And we got this big, huge dust storm approaching.
Kind of like there's a bigger problem that's approaching them, or they're going to.
Right. So are they going to be able to stop that storm?
Doesn't look like they are.
Not even possible. That showing the helplessness, how the environment is just basically taking over, right? That storm's coming. They're trying to outrun it, maybe, but it doesn't look like they're going to get away. So in this shot, it's all about how helpless our subjects are. The environment is going to take over and dominate them. And so when you see wide shots, extreme long shots like this, it really is about setting up the environment. Is it a hospitable place? Is it a happy place? Whatever it is, how is it going to impact our audience? So in here, our subject. So here we're seeing the storm coming in, and they're helpless. What they're doing, actually, this big, because prior to this, if you haven't seen the movie, this whole elaborate chase sequence in cars, all that seemed big and in the moment and impactful. And when you cut to this shot, when they actually see the storm coming, you realize everything that they were doing is insignificant, because this thing is just, everything is a moot point that they were doing, because once this thing hits, it's gonna change everything. And so it's showing power between the environment and our subjects, how strong or weak they could be. In this case, they're pretty weak, and it's a really useful tool. It also can help you set the environment up. Here's another one. So this, anybody see The Shining?
Yes.
That's one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you've not seen Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, you need to put it on your list and watch it this semester. This is one of the must, if I plan on being a filmmaker, I need to watch this movie. So here's the opening scene. So watch what they do in this, okay?
I just found out recently that the theme wasn't written for the movie, and that blew my mind because it fits so well with the movie.
It wasn't
Really?
written for the movie.
No, it was not. Like, that blew my mind.
That's
But
insane.
Huh.
I've always associated it with the movie.
I thought Kubrick had something, was part of making the music on this. I'm trying to remember.
As far as I know, the theme, the other music perhaps, but this theme itself, as far as I know, was not written for the film.
Okay, well, let's all take a listen. So here's what I want you to pay attention to. So look at this is one extreme long shot. So this is all before they had gimbals, before they had drones. This was basically someone hanging out the side of a helicopter and shooting these shots. The very first shot of the movie. So think about, what's the point of all these shots? So all right, we see a car driving on the road, big, beautiful landscapes. Why spend all this time in the beginning of the movie showing this? And yeah, it's, not bad for opening credits, I guess.
A sense of isolation.
Yeah. So why do I need to show my audience that? What's the whole point as a filmmaker to do that?
It creates interest and makes them wonder, like, where are we going?
Yeah, could be foreshadowing, maybe.
And it sets you up for the movie that you're about to watch.
It does, but what I like about it is how they set the movie up. This whole long, opening sequence of long tracking shots of this little Volkswagen driving through the mountains really establishes the fact that once they get to the hotel for the winter and they're cut off from the world, they are truly cut off. There is no place to go. There's no way out. It's impossible. And so Kubrick was brilliant in doing this, setting it up this way. And if you think about it, there's no dialogues needed. We don't have to say, oh, well, where are you going? Well, I'm going to be staying at this garden, taking care of this hotel over the winter in this isolated place. No, we're just setting it up here just by visually showing it. And yeah, we've got the credits rolling, and it's a way also, because back then part of the deal with the unions is we had to have all the credits played at the beginning of the movie for the main key people before we could do anything. And here we go, get to the final hotel. No close-ups. We don't show anything about the car, who's inside the car, or anything at this point. So again, this is all about, in the end, yeah, if spoiler alert. So when Jack Nicholson goes crazy, it's not just about him or the ghosts or the spirits manipulating him. The other main antagonist in this movie is the environment, because there is no place to go. They can't just leave and get away from him, because they're going to die if they do that, because it's the middle of winter, completely isolated. And so what better way to set that up than to do a sequence of extreme long shots showing how far away and how remote this place is. So I can use this extreme long shot to set the environment up. It gets my showing them in context with it. I use it for foreshadowing, to showing what's going to happen down the road. It's a tool. Think of it as I just want to show the perspective of my subjects in the environment they're in, and how in playing more preference to the environment. Okay, high angle shot. So you can have an extreme long shot can also have the same effect as a high angle shot. So I can use an extreme long shot to make your subject feel distant or unfamiliar. I can also do it with a high angle shot. So by doing a high angle, I can also make my subject feel overwhelmed by its location. Remember, we talked earlier about raising the camera. It's going to make everybody feel weaker. Same thing we're talking about right here. If I want to really show, someone weak or helpless or confused or something, use a high angle. Here, it's a wide high, right? We're above the character right here, showing how small they are compared to the mountainous area they are. Here, we're just above our characters, showing them kind of looking down, helpless and kind of confused about what's going on. The angle is what's giving our audience that interpretation or that perspective on it. If we shot this at their eye level, it wouldn't be the same. By raising it, we make them small, we make them helpless, we make them confused. So high angle can also be used. Okay, so now we're starting to move in. So now we're in the long shot, which is LS, and it can also be known as a wide shot, WS. So the long shot is kind of a bit, it's still showing the environment, but a bit closer. So if your subject is a person, his or her body will be in view, but not filling the frame. So if that extreme wide shot, that long shot was this, big, huge world where we see, the whole environment and our subject are tiny little dots. Here, we're starting to come in. We're starting to get a little more personal. We're our subject, but we're still putting preference on the environment. The environment is still the leading thing in the frame. That's what's dictating everything. So here on the beach, showing we're nothing but him, this person and the beach, showing the isolation. Maybe there's nothing there but the ocean, and maybe they're stuck on a beach somewhere. I don't remember. But it's still about the environment first. The environment plays key role in this shot. So of the many camera shots, a long shot builds up distance and location. So I can use that super extreme shot set up. I can jump to a long shot to show my character in the environment. Now we see a little more detail on our character to know who they are, but we're still focusing on the location. Okay, full shot. Look at Thor all ready to go with his hammer. So now we're talking about camera shots that let your subjects fill the frame while still keeping an emphasis on the scenery. So in these type of shots, full shots, the camera is close enough to capture your subject's basic appearance. So these are pretty important shots in filmmaking, because I still want to see the environment. If I spend all this money on building sets and locations and props and extras and everything, I don't want to shoot the whole movie in close-ups and extreme close-ups, because I just wasted all the money on the shots, on the locations. I'm not going to see them in the shots. So the full shot still gives us enough information that we can see detail and emotion and stuff in our characters, but still connect them in the environment and still see the environment. So a lot of movies, action movies, you'll see shots like this, and they'll jump between the full shot and the close-up and medium shot. But I'm going to put these in because if I spent money on location, I want to see it. Even if that means I just spent money going to a location and I didn't set deck it, I still want to see it because I spent that time and energy to get there. So the full shot is going to give that to me. Get this thing down here. Okay, medium long shot, MLS, and medium wide shots can be kind of the same thing. Medium long shot frames your subject from roughly the knees up. It splits the difference between a full shot and a medium shot. Oh, sorry, went back for a second. So again, getting more detailed information on our subject, but still connecting them with the environment. We can see him seeing the aliens come around the corner. We can still tell we're in a western town from the 1800s or some period piece. Here we see the Joker approaching. We can see still in the city. We can see the environment here, but I get a closer point of view. I can start seeing emotions on their face better, but still connecting it with our environment. Now we're going to move into what's known as the cowboy shot. So this is basically hips up. Frames the subject from roughly from the thighs up. Called a cowboy shot because it was used a lot in Westerns to frame up a gunslinger's gun or holster on his hip. So that's where this shot came from old Westerns. So if I'm going to have a shot where there's going to be it's going to be a fight at the OK Corral, right? And there's two people that are going to draw it out at high noon. In these shots, I want to make sure that I see the guns right here. So I'm going to frame it to the guns there because at some point, someone's going to draw first, right? And if I have this cowboy shot, I'm going to see the draw happen. So cowboy shots are used a lot because look how we can see her face and really see her emotion, yet we're still connected to the environment. And so is there a big difference between a cowboy shot and our shot here, the medium shot? They're kind of similar, but they're still wider. Look how they're still wider here. It's still really about the environment with our subject in there, where here it's now really about our subject. And notice the environment is starting to get softer. We're starting to lose detail in the backgrounds. So cowboy shots are certainly when we're really into our character and it's about our character and what they're doing and not necessarily about the environment. That makes sense so far? Anybody have any questions or thoughts?
Is the cowboy shot almost always used for something that's powerful, like where the character is in power?
I'm going to say, yeah.
Okay.
Mostly. There could be, there definitely could be situations where you could use a cowboy where you're, it's be hard because really it's a specific type of shot.
And it's straight on, right? Or almost straight on?
It doesn't always have to be straight on, but usually it's kind of, it could be side. It's really about from getting the framing from the top of the head to the mid thighs. So you could be sideways on it. You could be in the back, from the back looking, but in the end, what it's really about is that now we're focusing our eye definitely on our subject, our character. And it's definitely an action shot. It's going to be about body movement than more about emotions or face. And what we're going to see as we move in. So medium shots. So here's where we start really getting into the nitty gritty of our subjects. So notice now we're starting to cut at the waist, right? Still have the environment in there. And it's kind of like a cowboy shot, but frames up roughly the waist up. So it's going to emphasize more of your subject and keeps their surroundings still visible. So these shots, like when we up until we get past the medium shots, are all about connection between our subject and our environment. So when you watch a lot of movies, yeah, they do have close-ups for sure, but you'll see a lot of medium shots, a lot of long shots, a lot of wide shots, specifically when you have big sets, because we spent the money on the set, I better see it. There's nothing a producer wants to see worse than spending hundreds of thousands of dollars building elaborate sets, and then the whole movie is shot in close-ups and medium close-ups, and the whole background's just not seen. So what was the point of building that? And so when you're thinking about low budget filmmaking, you may think about that. Well, I don't have the budget to make big elaborate scenes. Maybe I shoot these all with close-up shots and tight shots so that I can hide the background and maybe only do partial set deck and save myself some money. Movies have absolutely done that in the past. And I've done that on TV shows where we were stealing shots and we had to go back and do a pickup, and we don't have the crew to build everything, so we just have a little piece of something that I'm going to do in a real tight shot to make it look like it belongs, but it's not quite really there because we don't have that location anymore. So medium shots still going to connect to the background, but look at him, look at Batman now. We see Christian Bale, we could see his eyes better, his expression better, his muscles, everything about him is now much more in detail. And it's hard to kind of justify it on this tiny little screen here, but just imagine you're sitting in a theater, or just imagine you're sitting in your living room with a big, huge TV screen where suddenly you could see all this stuff. And this is where 4K really starts coming into play. And the whole argument, you don't need 4K on a home TV set. I'm going to argue you do, because we're at a point now where we have big enough screens, and our productions, or even if they're television productions, are more elaborate, that there's detail now. You can see it really well. Go watch if you've got a 4K TV at home, go watch a streaming show or something streaming in 4K and freeze it and look at the frame. You could really see a huge amount of information. So it is worth having the higher resolution. And so we want to make sure we shoot it so that we can maximize the investment we're making in our sets and our actors, our costume, and everything. Okay, medium close-up. So we're going to see this shot, the medium shot, medium close-up, and the close-up are going to be big staples of filmmaking. You're always guaranteed to have these shots in there. So here we go. Medium close-up frames your subject roughly the chest up. So it typically favors the face, but still keeps the subject somewhat distant. So we're in that comfort zone of like when you meet somebody, right? We're not in their face, in their grill. We're still back up enough to see them, see enough detail in their expressions and everything. The background, notice the background now is even getting more compressed, right? We know we're still in the bowling alley. We can see the bowling lanes right there, the alleys and the pins and everything. But notice that now they're much more out of focus. They're softer, right? We're starting to lose the environment. If the wide shots show us the whole world, as we start coming in, the focal length starts getting tighter and tighter, and we start losing perspective of our world. And that's good, because when we lose perspective of our world, we're now focusing on our subject more. So they kind of go hand in hand. There are exceptions. I could put a really wide angle lens on my camera and go up close for a medium close up and have them fill the frame, but still have this wide field of view and see the environment. But it's still going to be out of focus. It's still going to be softer, and it's still going to be priority is going to be on my subject. Now we're getting to the close up. Here we go. Jack's ready to play. So here's where the person it gets personal in your world. So pretty much, it's time for a close-up when you want those emotions and reactions to be revealed. So close-ups traditionally are used when you want to have that moment where someone's frightened and screaming, someone's happy or emotionally ready to break down and cry. You can see it all the time in movies. They cut to the close-up when they want you to connect with the audience. So think of this as when you're having that conversation with somebody, or say you're dating somebody, right? What happens when you start dating, when you first meet somebody? Like, as you start dating, do you guys get closer and everybody gets closer to each other? Yeah, right? So you get more intimate, more personal. That's when you get really, the intimacy is so there that you like getting close up. So that's how humans behave. So when we're thinking about our shot selection for a film, I may decide I want to get to the close-ups when I want that intimacy to be with my audience, to bring them together, to bring them to our audience. Or I'm sorry, to bring our audience to our characters or subjects. Same thing be happen when I want to, you know, horrify or frighten someone. If I have the antagonist and I cut to a close-up like here with Jack as he breaks through the door ready to, you know, to kill his wife with the big axe, this having that close-up of him is enough to you know, put terror into somebody, especially when it cut to Shelley Duvall, who's terrified at this point in the movie. So I can use it for either intimacy, for like bonding. I also can do it to repulse somebody and frighten somebody. But the key to the close-up is it's all about revealing a subject's emotions and reactions. So again, close-up is where you fill the frame with a part of your subject. If your subject's a person, it's often just their face. So close-up is usually something like this. It can be, you know, it doesn't have to be perfectly from the top of the head to the chin. It could be a variation on that, but it's usually containing mostly their head. You can think of them also as talking heads, right? That's a term, you know, not just the band, but, you know, a term that we've used in TV and in film. So don't be afraid of using the close-up. You want to get close-ups. Again, a lot of times students starting out shoot everything medium, wide, long shot, never get the close-ups. That's where the money shots are. That's where the motion is, right? That's what people pay. When you want to see your favorite celebrity on a big screen, you want to see them in a close-up, whether they're happy, sad, or frightened. So keep that in consideration. Close-ups, so you always want to get close-ups. I never, ever not shoot a scene without close-ups. Okay, now we move on. Extreme close-ups, ECUs. So an extreme close-up is the most you can fill a frame with your subject. It often shows eyes, mouth, gun triggers. Extreme close-up shots, smaller objects get greater detail and are the focal point. So here, shooting an extreme close-up of her, look what's going on here. We see her focused on something, right? Can we see what she's watching? Do you have an idea what she's looking at?
I think this is when she's watching a beauty pageant, and you can kind of see it in her glasses.
Yeah. Both you guys got it. TV show, watching the beauty pageant right here. So this was a great example of when to use a close-up. So by using the close-up here, I show her intent, her focus on watching the beauty pageant. But then I could also see what she's watching and put it in one shot. And I don't have to do a cutaway to it. I did it all in one shot. And that's really cool when you can do something like that. So great example of a close-up. Other one here, Citizen Kane, Rosebud. So the whole movie that Citizen Kane is the hunt for Rosebud. What's Rosebud? All these reporters and newspaper people hunting, trying to uncover the mystery of Rosebud. Because why is Rosebud important? That's the last word he says, Citizen Kane says before he dies. And so to emphasize that for the audience, they do an extreme close-up of his mouth, uttering the word Rosebud, and then dead. That starts the whole mystery of the movie. So why not make it an extreme close-up? So these are really powerful tools to use when you want to super hyper emphasize something. So you can use this to emphasize a specific feature of your subject, a word, whatever. But you couldn't imagine, the thing is, you got to kind of, these, to me, the ECU and the close-up are these tools you want to drop in at the right moment. Like you don't want to shoot the whole movie in extreme close-ups because your audience has no foundation to what's going on in the world. We're just looking at this one specific thing. Same thing with ECU. I mean, with close-ups, we lose reference to where they're at. So part of all these shots, understanding what they are, and they're very specific shots. So when I call up an ECU, director says, hey, get me an ECU of her glasses. That's what I'm going to get, because I'm going to fill the frame up with those glasses. Get me the ECU of Rosebud. Okay, right on the mouth for that. They're very specific. And so by us all understanding these descriptions and these short, terms for these shots, we're all in the same language of communicating when we talk about shot coverage. So whether we're on a set and someone's director's calling off what type of shot he wants, we all know what it is when they say ECU, MCU, get me a cowboy. We know that cowboy does not look like this. No, it's the guns up. So that helps us become faster and more efficient on set. Director doesn't have to say, yeah, get me the shot where you put the top of the frame to the top of his head, and then put the bottom of the frame, just halfway between the thighs. Think how much time and energy it's spent to say that if we instead of just say, get me a cowboy shot. See how much more better that works? And we're all on the same page. We all know what that shot is. Now, grant, the director or DP or whoever may finesse the shot and say, get a little punch in a little bit tighter. No, why not just a little bit to dial it in exactly? But if you can get to that ECU or that cowboy or the close-up pretty close, dial it in without that person, you're saving time right there too. That's what it's all about. We're all on the same page communicating. So if you looked at it on a breakdown like this, we're talking about the full shot would be head to toe. Medium shot, probably stay around knees up. Cowboy shot, it's going to be at the hips up. Make sure you got room for that gun. Medium shot's going to be waist up. MCU, which is medium close up, is usually chest up. It's usually going to be 1, 2, 3 or 4 buttons down, usually somewhere around here to the head. And then when we start moving into close up is anything from neck up, could be chin up, depends. And then when we get to extreme close up, it's going to be tight on a part of the subject, somewhere around there. So if you can just remember these basic shot frames, then you're on the right path to understanding the jargon of framing and how it works. And when people talk about it on set, you can communicate quickly and be able to frame a shot up. Or if you're a director and you're telling somebody what you want, it's much easier to communicate this way. And we all know what these shots are. And these are standards. And like I said before, like when someone says, give me a medium, I'm going to jump to here at first. And then from there, we may say, give me a little bit tighter, or, why not just a little bit more? But it still is going to revolve around this medium shot. That makes sense to everybody? This is all about when to use the right shot. How do I know when to use a close-up versus a wide shot versus a medium shot and so forth? A lot of that decision-making comes down to, when we're talking about in the narrative world, we're talking about looking at the script, reading the script. So obviously, if you're the director, you should read the script, right? You probably should memorize the script if you're the director and know it, every inch of it inside and out. If you're the DP or a camera person, you definitely need to read the script. You probably should memorize it too and know it inside out, even if you're just figuring out framing. So when I sit down and get a script, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to read it. I'm probably going to read it like 3 times in a row, or at least 3 times before I start seriously working on it, just so I get it in my head, what's going on. And so say the first pass, I'm just going to read it for purely reading it, just so I can get caught up into it and get a feeling for what's going on. Second pass, I'm going to read it. I'm going to be a little more aware of what's going on, like more, technically, let's break out of the emotional context of it. And then the third pass is when I'm going to start taking notes. So I'll literally have my copy of the script and take a ballpoint pen or a pencil and start going through the scenes. And as I go through the scenes, I'm going to start writing shot ideas in there. So I'm like, okay, here's the scene where we first meet our character. the character is, approaching from the desert in a car. So I think this is where I'm going to have an extreme long shot here to show the desert. So I want an extreme long shot, but I don't want to show the character yet because I don't want to show them until they get to the next scene. So then I'm kind of juxtaposition those super wide shots of the desert, and I'm going to juxtaposition it with maybe extreme close-up. So I might have a shot of the wheels going by in frame. Maybe I'll overcrank that so I can slow it down a little bit and see a little bit more. Maybe I'll have a tracking shot from behind the car. I'm not going to reveal the character. I'm going to do everything before I reveal the character. Then the car stops in the next scene. The door opens up. Maybe I'll have an extreme close-up or a close-up of the foot coming down and walking. And then maybe my final reveal shot will be a medium shot of the person as they're walking. The camera's going to head the truck with them and then ped up or crane up to reveal them. So that's just something I just thought in my head right now. But those shot decisions came about me going, okay, well, the script says we don't know who this person is until the next scene. So I want to set the first scene up to kind of creating a mystery for my audience. So the choice of shots that I use are A, not going to reveal my character, but B, also I'm going to combine it wide shots with extreme shots. I'm never just going to have like a normal shot of tracking with the car. I want to create a bit of mystery. So that might be where my logic process goes with shot selection. And we might get to a scene where maybe the antagonist, I don't want to reveal who they are. We don't know who the killer is. We just know that it's somebody, right? So, but I need to show something about them. So maybe it's extreme close-ups that I only show in the beginning, and I hide who they are. Maybe it's their hand. Maybe there's something about their hand. There's a tattoo or something that they have that's unique. Might focus on that. And as we reveal more, so maybe extreme close-ups or maybe super wide where we can't identify that character. So a lot of the decision-making when it comes to what shots you figure out are based off what your gut instinct is with the film when you read it. It's just weird. How do I want to reveal? When do I want the intimacy to come in and out for my characters? A lot of times you're probably going to work in hand with the director when you start figuring out shots. So a lot of times I'll write a bunch of shot lists, the shots that I think will work in each scene. Then I'll have a meeting with the director and we'll talk about it. And the director, 9 times out of 10, is going to have a shot list, an idea of what he or she wants. But by me creating my own list, I can say, hey, I know you did this, but what if we did this instead during that one scene? They're like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. That's kind of cool. And then from the two, you take both, my ideas and their ideas and merge them together, and you're going to start coming out with a shot list.
So you're saying the director usually goes through it first, and then, obviously it depends on the team and like what kind of decisions they make. But if it's my movie, I go through and I go, okay, I want this and this and this and this, and then what do you do after that as a director of photography? Yeah.
So most of the time, producers are going to hire the director, or sometimes the director is a producer. They're going to have the script before anybody else does.
Right.
And so there are definitely occasions where if a DP and a director or a team, they've been working on, like, say, Wally Pfister and Christopher Nolan for the longest time worked together from his early days. So I'm sure Wally was brought in to pre-production way early to start conceiving and designing. A lot of times sometimes I'll meet with directors that had just read the script. They haven't broken it down. They haven't made shot ideas because they want to hear my input first. But other times I have directors and they come with their list. They're already done. They've got what they want. That doesn't mean they're not going to listen to my input because they're hiring me to help collaborate with them. But it's always good when everybody has their own point of view, because 9 times out of 10, when you look at both points of view and combine them together, you're going to find what's really the real point of view. And that's the whole key to collaboration. For me as a DP, the worst part is when I get a director like going, I don't know, what do you think? Yeah, just figure out whatever you want, let me know. Then I'm like, really? There's no collaboration going on here. That's the worst. So again, this is a world of collaboration where we're trying to, the cream rises to the top. All the thoughts put together, the best thing will come up. And it doesn't mean it's committee decision by committee. In the end, the director is right. The director is the one calling the shots. So I can push and pitch for whatever I want. And if they're like, nah, I like what I want, I'm sticking with what I have, that's the end result, because that's the director's, in charge. They're the key creative artists, if you remember from the quiz. So everybody's different. Everybody has a different working relationship, but usually the director and the DP are going to sit down and run through the script and come up with shot lists. And we'll come up with a basic shot list. And then as the development of the production moves forward, those shot lists are going to be refined. At some point, they're going to be turned into storyboards once they're really refined. So the way it usually goes is come up with instead of calling it a shot list, at first I'm just going to call it a wish list of the shots we think we should get. It would be really cool to get. And some of them might be, I might put elaborate description, say, okay, I need a crane here, a techno crane, where we're going to start on their feet, come up to their eyes, and then pull back to extreme wide shot. And then it's going to track back through a window and do all this crazy stuff that I think will work great for the script. And we're like, all right, let's put that down. And then when the budget finally comes through in production, they're like, no, you're not getting that. You can have a Dana Dolly, but you can't have a techno crane. And I'm like, okay, well, that shot in the wish list is moving over to too bad list, not happening. And that's really what happens. So in the beginning, when you're trying to figure out the shots, you don't want to censor yourself. You don't want to be like, I can't afford. You shouldn't do that, because you're just stifling your brain. Instead, you just want to put everything out there and write them. I'll write them on the sides of the script. Then I'll take a spreadsheet and put them in the spreadsheet where I have the shot list and I'll have the scene and everything put together. So I keep track of all this stuff. And then as we move and we develop and we figure out what we really have time for or budget for, then things are going to get cut. Things are going to get combined. Things are going to get changed. But you accept that as a natural part of the process, and not, oh, well, I'm doing this because I'm in a crappy production that has no money. No, it's just everybody, whether you're Spielberg, Christopher Nolan, Spike Lee, or me, it's all the same. You're all going to have the wish list, and it's all going to get boiled down eventually to what you can actually pull off. And the key there is trying to preserve as much as you've gotten the vision you have, but doing it within budget and schedule.
So basically today we have the recap, 6 priorities in there. They're all right in here. So basic framing, composition is here. So these are the stuff that we kind of talked about. So you can kind of jump in there and look. So again, this one's right here. You can download it and take a look at it. Same thing here, there's a PDF here, so you'll be able to find them in there. So the last thing I want to kind of talk about today is smartphone cinematography. So these things have come a long way in the last 10 years or so since they've started. When it first came out, the thought of having a camera on a phone was a joke. These things suck. What's the point? And they've gone from being like a novelty kind of cute little toy to suddenly being something that everybody uses all day for communication, for photography, for cinematography. And so the thing is, they're just going to keep getting better and better. So it doesn't mean that they're going to replace regular digital cinema cameras sometime in the future. I'm not sure. I do know that the ergonomics of this thing aren't quite ready to compete with the big guns, the big cameras, because it's just only so much you can do trying to hold a shot. And you can hold a shot like this, but try putting a 1,000mm lens on here and trying to hold a shot handheld. Good luck, it's not going to work. So even though these sensors, the quality's every year going to get better. I'm sure later this month when Apple announces the iPhone 13 I guarantee there'll be massive improvements to the camera. There'll be massive improvements to something in there. And it's going to every year notch closer and closer to what the capabilities of digital cinema cameras can do. And it's even at the point where we've used iPhones to get shots that we couldn't do. So if one time I was shooting a show and they wanted me to get a shot inside the car while someone's driving, and our camera rig was too big, wouldn't do it. So we decided, all right, let's just shoot it on the iPhone. And we shot it. And it was an iPhone 6, and it got rolled into the show. And did it look horrible and terrifying? No, people probably barely noticed it. So these things are going to give you opportunity. So what's great about them is if you don't have money, if you can't afford to buy a Black Magic camera, or even let's say you can't afford to buy a DSLR right now, and you have an iPhone or an Android, you still got something that you can work with. And that's the key here, because again, remember I said that whole 10,000 hour thing? So you want to put your time in. So if all you got is a smartphone, then that's what you want to do. You want to take advantage of it, and just, it's better to shoot on anything than to not shoot on nothing. So don't let it stop you from being creative if you don't have the big digital cameras or the DSLRs or camcorders. These little guys will help you get your projects done. Tangerine, remember we talked, a couple movies were shot on iPhones. They got theatrical release. It worked. I'm not going to say it's going to replace big cameras, and they're not going to get an Oscar for cinematography, but did it tell the story? Was it compelling? Yeah. So if you check here, this little article kind of runs down a bunch of movies that were shot with Tangerine and a couple, and this article probably came out a couple of years ago, but there's a bunch of articles here about some movies. Unsane. Anybody see that? Steven Soderbergh shot a movie on an iPhone. And that guy, at that point, could have picked any camera platform he wanted. And he chose the iPhone because he wanted the aesthetics of it. And he wanted the intimacy and the quickness turnaround on it. So big filmmakers, directors have used it. So it's totally usable to try. So check that article out. The thing about these cameras is that, they're not going to replace the big cameras. There's certain limitations, and people have tried. I remember we played around putting lens adapters on the front here, so we put still glass on here and shoot. It kind of worked, but in the end result, it was just too cumbersome and fragile of a system to work with. So these aren't going to replace any big cameras anytime soon, just for the fact of the ergonomics, being able to hold it, hand hold it, do all this stuff. But you still can get little tools for this to help you out. You can get little supports that'll clip onto here that will allow you to hold your camera better and not just hold it this way. You can have a handle on it. You can put hot shoes and cold shoes on here, so you can put microphones and put maybe little lights, like a ring light if you want to do something like that. You can get gimbals for these things. Anybody see DJI announced today their new gimbal for the iPhone? They're 5. Let me call it up real quick. They're Osmo 4. There it is right here. Come back here. So they're DJI Osmo OM5. This thing's crazy. It's awesome. It makes great tracking shots. Works with your phone, uses your phone camera. You can do all this awesome stuff with it. And the best part about it, $160. So all the technology that they use for their bigger gimbals, they dump into this little guy here, and you're reaping the benefits of it for a fraction of the price. So I think they're going to be, in fact, I'm going to order one next week to get one and play around with it. Their technology is just dropping in price here to getting better and better for us. So if you want to, you could have this as a camera platform to move around on, put it on a gimbal like one of these for cheap, and suddenly boom, you've added camera movement, solid movement that's going to add to your, your tools for creating. So just because you could shoot on the smartphone doesn't mean that you got to work around its limitations. So the biggest thing you need to do with these cameras on these smartphones is to get them in manual mode. If you leave them in auto mode, you're going to suffer the same fate as shooting auto on a DSLR or whatever. The exposure is going to open and close. Everything's going to be out of whack. It's not going to have that static cinematic film feel to it. So how do you get around that? Because if you just use the app that's built into your phone, it doesn't really give you many options to do that. So what you need to do is buy another app to do that. And so the only app that I'm recommending to people, and there's dozens of them out there, but the only one that I'm recommending is this one called Filmic Pro. So if you click on this link here, it'll take you to their website, or at least it should. There we go. And so what is Filmic Pro? It's basically this app that unlocks all the manual control on your smartphone. So it's going to give me control over the exposure. It's going to give me control over the shutter. It's going to allow me to record in higher resolution bit rates. So I'm going to have bigger, better quality files. It's going to allow me to use frame rates that are audio compatible. So 23.98 instead of just regular 24 frames a second. Can't really just do that in a regular iPhone. Some of the newer ones, if you have a newer camera, iPhone or Android, you can get 10-bit log in there. So suddenly now we're talking about extracting high capability, high quality images from these phones. So you can't get that from just the base app that comes in your phone. You need to use one of these things. So this is the one that I recommend because this is the one that everybody uses. So Tangerine shot on it. That movie I just said, Unsane by Steven Soderbergh, they shot on it. Any music videos, whenever we use these phones for anything in television, that's the app that we're using. So Filmic Pro. It's not super expensive. It's like $20, $14, $15 for the app. And I think there's some in-app purchases you can make for another $20. So you're looking at maybe $30, $35, but totally worth it to unlock the capabilities of it here. So it's a great place to look at if you find yourself having to work with your phone for any of these projects. Do yourself a favor, download this and start using it. So I'm not going to go into full details about how to use it because I'm not really about this, but I put links here to a bunch of their tutorials. They have a huge amount of tutorials on their website about how to do everything. I put the basics here, getting it going, setting it up, advanced manual control, live, monitoring everything. So here I've also got, not only is it going to give me manual control, but it's going to give me stuff like peaking so I can see the focusing on my camera. It's going to give me scopes, or not, I don't know if it gives me scopes, but it's going to give me zebra patterns so I can set my exposure properly. It's going to give me a lot of tools to get a professional image created out of these cameras that are in these phones. So it's totally worth it. It also is going to give you a way to download the files because they're recorded in a higher resolution and they're more, formatted for working in Premiere or Final Cut or DaVinci Resolve. So lots of reasons to do it. Second things you want to think about here is some type of hand grip. So I don't know if this link works still anymore. Yeah, it's still there. So if I wanted to hold my camera a little bit better, instead of trying just to do this the whole time, I could buy a hand grip like this for $20. That'll hold the camera, and then I can mount other things on the top there to help me do it. So that's a useful investment to make this a better quality camera for cinematography. So another one here, Tripod S, $18. So these are great little tripods. So if you can't afford like a big tripod, you can get one of these to, you know, hold your camera. Actually, I had another one, right, but I have my wallet with me. I have a tiny little tripod. I'll show it to you next class that fits in my wallet. And I can take out and flip out and put my camera on there, my phone on there anytime I want to frame a shot up. But these are great to have because you can lock a shot off and put it down, and I don't have to spend a lot of money on a big expensive tripod. $20 from Amazon. So here I'm talking about this gimbal, 99 bucks, but I'm still going to pass on this because now the DJI one is out. That's way better. So for 60, 70 bucks more, you get way more for your money. But if you can't afford the DJI 5 gimbal out now, this is the next best one to get, 99 bucks. So might not have the best, as good a software as the DJI, but it's going to get the job done pretty well. So you might want to check that one out too. So bottom line, it's totally possible to shoot with these, especially if you got a newer smartphone. Not going to give you the same quality. It's not going to give you the same experience of shooting with a DSLR or even better, a digital cinema camera, because, you know, even though these are great little cameras, they're going to have some limitations in whether image quality, lens option, how far you can zoom in. Depth of field is the big one you're going to lose. You're not going to get those really super shallow depth of field images out of this camera that you would get out of like a, you know, a super 35 sensor or a full frame sensor DSLR. But in the end, if this is what you have access to and that's it, that is better than nothing. Does that make sense to everybody? Last two things I want to talk about are cameras again. I found out that the department is willing to rent cameras out to students this semester. But the deal is they're going to do it only for a week at a time. So you can rent a camera out for a week from them. I don't know the logistics of it yet. I'm going to find out in the next couple of days and I'll post it and let you guys know. So anybody who doesn't have access to a DSLR but wants to shoot one and not use their phone, they'll have the opportunity to get a camera from there. And I think, I don't know about tripods. I don't think we're going to be handing out tripods, but you can at least get a camera to work with. So that's the first thing. The second thing is Adobe. So if you might not have access to Adobe right now because they just got the licensing. They figured out exactly how many licenses they need last week and they submitted it in. So we're still waiting to hear back from the department of when that process activates. So what I'm going to say is give it till next Tuesday to see what happens. And if you don't have access by next Tuesday, let me know. And I'll remind everybody on Monday about it to make sure, because it may take over the weekend for those licenses to get through the system and activate and everybody be able to download. It makes sense?
You were talking about that at some point, like if we want to purchase our own DSLR camera, we're going to go through which ones we should get.
Yeah, we're going to probably get to that, I'm hoping in a week or so.
Okay.
Soon, but I'll tell you really quick right now because we got a little bit of time. The biggest thing you want to think about is obviously going to be budget, right? How much money you want to spend. That's the bottom line for everything in life, right? How much do you want to spend? But the thing you need to think about is not just the camera you're buying. Because you can buy a camera and, all right, I've got a camera, but do I have a tripod? Do I have a way to stabilize it? Do I have lenses? Does it have a fixed lens or do I need to buy lenses? Do I need anything else? Do I need a matte box? Do I need a way to record sound? So when you have to consider what you're trying to get, you know, especially if you're starting from scratch, you have to take an account of all the things you need to pull it off, whatever you're trying to do. And so maybe if you're lucky, you've got a friend who has sound equipment, and you don't have to get any sound equipment, then you're golden. You can focus more money on the camera. But if you're just starting out, you want to think about camera support platform, lenses, filters. If I'm shooting a DSLR, I need to put money aside for neutral density filters, because if I don't have those, I'm not going to be able to shoot outdoors without using the shutter and everything blowing out. So if I'm going to spend the money, I want to make sure, you know, I might end up spending $50 to $100 on neutral density filters, maybe even more if I buy the higher quality ones. And the second thing is, what's the life expectancy of this equipment? Are you buying this as your first round of equipment and you're going to eventually move up the food chain? Then maybe I'm not going to spend a ton of money up front and buy a lot of really expensive equipment because I can't afford it all at once. So that might mean that I'm not going to make a huge investment in the camera and in the lenses, or maybe I'm going to invest in the lenses and get a cheaper camera body, and knowing that I'm going to upgrade that camera body later on, but I'm going to keep my lenses because they're going to be compatible down the road. So there's a couple elements here. The biggest one, it would be figuring out how much money you have to spend. If you have under $1,000 to spend or under $500 to spend, well, you're probably looking at getting a, you know, like a Rebel or a Canon camera with a kit lens and starting that way, because that's the cheapest way you're going to go. Probably, if I were you, I would lean towards Sony. Again, we're going to I'll talk more about this in a little more detail. You probably get a Sony A camera for under $800 with a lens. That will be pretty good for video, but you're not going to get anything else. The gimbal, the moving the camera, tripod, all that stuff is also things you're going to need to budget. So either you're going to break it down, get the camera first, and then save up and get these pieces down the road, or you're going to try to get everything at once and get a lesser quality camera so that you have some of these components. But what I will tell you is eventually, if you're serious about doing this, you will buy equipment again and reinvest, because whatever you can afford now, you will eventually outgrow. It won't be good enough for what you want to do down the road. So it's this weird little dynamic to kind of figure out. Anybody else?
Do they know how much they're going to be renting those cameras for?
Yeah, it's really cheap. We're talking about a couple dollars. Nothing, yeah, nothing crazy. It's just really enough to make sure, you know, if something breaks, we can repair it and stuff like that. But there might be there's going to be, you're probably going to have to get a, it's going to be a little procedure to do it. So it's not to say, all right, put me on a list and you're going to show up and grab a camera. I got to find out exactly what the procedure is, but I should know by next week. We're going to probably find out on Friday. All right, well, like I said in the beginning of this class, you should take advantage of me, even if it's not exactly what we're talking about. If you have any questions about filmmaking, television industry, whatever, now's the chance, man, because after the semester, it's going to be hard to get a hold of me because I'm going to be all over the place. So if you don't have questions now, think about it and just keep a list of what you want to talk about. All right, in saying that, then I'm going to wrap it up early because we got through everything we wanted to talk about. So you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see everybody on Monday, right? So there you have it.
Thank you, Professor. See you on Monday.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.